I am Ryan Jensen, and 1 year ago today, I made one of the most painful discoveries of my life. It wasn't an anniversary I ever expected to celebrate, but somehow, here I am reflecting on it, not because I'm relishing the pain, but because I've come through it stronger and wiser than I was before. A year ago, I was just sitting in my office, deep into a project, thinking about the usual things: client meetings, work deadlines, and maybe grabbing a burger for lunch. My life seemed good. I had a steady job, a beautiful wife, Anna, whom I thought I could trust, and everything felt like it was falling into place. But then, in a blink, everything changed. I wasn't prepared for the moment that shook me to my core. It wasn't the long nights, the mood swings, or even the tension between us. No, it was nothing like that. I was living in my bubble, oblivious to the truth that had been right under my nose. It was a Wednesday, nearing lunchtime. I was driving back from a meeting with a client, my stomach growling for the fried fish sandwich from the Whale, a tiny spot downtown known for its crispy fried fish and tangy tartar sauce. It was the kind of simple pleasure I could look forward to on an otherwise ordinary day. I was stopped at a red light, my mind wandering to the taste of that sandwich, when something caught my eye. Anna, my wife, was coming out of the parking lot of a local motel. I watched in disbelief as she turned the corner and drove straight into the lot of the Lakeside Inn. It didn't make sense. Why would she be there? My heart raced. I didn't know what to think. I had no reason to doubt her. She had never shown any signs, no late nights, no strange behavior, nothing. Yet, there she was, walking into that motel. I parked my car at a nearby gas station, my mind spinning. Instead of rushing over or calling her out, I did something I never thought I'd do. I stayed in my car. I watched. I waited. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but the curiosity was eating me alive. An hour passed, and then she came out, but she wasn't alone. A man wearing a designer suit, the kind of look that always seemed like a show-off to me, stepped out behind her. He slid into a Lexus and drove off. My stomach twisted into a knot. I couldn't focus on work for the rest of the day. I tried, but I couldn't get the image of her walking into that motel room with him out of my head. I sat in my office, staring at the computer screen, searching for divorce information. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. It was happening. My world was falling apart, and I didn't even know how to stop it. I didn't know the man's name, but I was determined to find out. Then, just when I thought I might burst from the pressure building inside me, the universe threw in a little twist. That evening, while we were sitting in front of the TV, Anna asked me what was wrong, as if everything was fine, as if she hadn't just betrayed me hours earlier. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone that you've just watched them walk into a motel with another man? How could I confront her when I didn't have all the answers yet? Instead, I said nothing. I watched the news, half listening to the reports of a bank robbery earlier that day. As the footage played on the screen, something caught my eye. There, in the footage, was a woman wearing a mask and a hoodie. Her face was covered, but the shape of her body, the way she moved, even her height, it looked so much like Anna. I didn't believe it for a second. I knew it wasn't her. After all, she had been in that motel room earlier, but I couldn't ignore the uncanny resemblance. I had an idea. Maybe it wasn't the most honest thing to do, but I didn't care. The next morning, I called the police station and casually mentioned that I thought the woman in the robbery footage looked a lot like my wife. I gave them some details: her car, where she lived, and the fact that she hadn't been home at the time of the robbery. What happened next was beyond anything I could have expected. I called the police station, acting as casual as I could. My voice felt steady, but inside, I was a mess. The officer on the other end of the line was polite, though I could tell they were dealing with their own stack of problems. I mentioned the robbery, dropped a few details about Anna, how she had recently bought a new car, her resemblance to the woman in the video, and gave them just enough to make them think they had a lead, but not enough to give away my full knowledge of the situation. I hung up, my heart racing. What had I just done? Part of me felt like a coward, hiding behind a vague tip, while another part felt oddly empowered. This was my way of getting back at her, of getting the truth to surface, without her knowing how much I already knew. The following days were a blur. I kept busy with work, trying to bury the storm raging in my mind. Anna didn't seem to notice the shift in me. She went about her days, making breakfast, doing laundry, acting as if everything was perfectly fine. But I knew what she had done, and I couldn't escape the image of her walking out of that motel. The call to the police was a calculated move, but it didn't go as smoothly as I expected. 3 days later, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was an officer, her face serious, almost apologetic. My stomach dropped. She told me that the lead I provided had led them nowhere. The woman in the robbery footage wasn't Anna after all. It was someone else entirely, someone with a similar build and height, but not her. The relief was immediate, but it didn't undo the nagging suspicion I had. I didn't feel like celebrating, though. If Anna wasn't the woman in the robbery footage, then what had I seen her doing at the motel? The unanswered questions felt like a tight knot in my chest. A part of me wanted to confront her, to scream out all the questions burning in my mind, but I was still holding back. I couldn't make sense of the pieces just yet, and something told me I needed to get to the bottom of this the right way, slowly, carefully. My next move had to be more precise. That weekend, I did something I hadn't expected myself to do. I followed her. It was a slow burn of anxiety creeping up on me as I sat in my car, watching her from a distance. Anna didn't know I was there, of course. She went about her usual Saturday routine, picking up groceries, stopping at the bank. But there was something in the way she carried herself, something that felt off. She kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear. I thought about the man she had been with at the motel. Who was he? Why didn't she mention him? I needed to find out who he was. I was getting closer to understanding, but I wasn't there yet. That night, as Anna and I sat in the living room, I could barely focus on her. Every word she spoke felt like it was coming from someone else. The truth was lurking beneath the surface, and I was determined to drag it out. I was thinking of going to that new restaurant tomorrow night, she said, her eyes bright and hopeful. It felt like an attempt to re-establish normalcy. She had no idea how close I was to shattering that illusion. Sure, I replied flatly. Sounds good. But I wasn't planning on going to that restaurant. No, I was planning something else entirely. The game was changing now. The police weren't going to help me unravel this mystery. I had to do it on my own. I didn't know what the truth would look like when I found it, but I was prepared for whatever came next. The next few days dragged on like a slow, suffocating fog. I couldn't stop thinking about that man. Who was he? Why did Anna look so comfortable with him? Everything about it felt wrong, and I could feel my trust in her slipping away, piece by piece. But I wasn't going to rush in blind this time. I had to be smart. That Saturday, I woke up early, my mind already set on the course of action. I wasn't going to follow her again, not yet anyway. I needed a different approach. So, I did the one thing I hadn't done yet. I called in a favor. I reached out to a private investigator, someone I had known through a mutual acquaintance years ago. I explained just enough to get his attention, but I didn't go into details about Anna or the motel. Just the basics. A missing person, a suspicion, and a request to dig into her life. It felt strange to even say it out loud, her life, as if I didn't even know her anymore. The PIA, no-nonsense guy named Vince agreed to help. He was straightforward and confident, which gave me a slight sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this after all. A couple of days later, Vince got back to me with information. Anna had been seen entering the Lakeside Inn multiple times over the past few weeks, but not with the same man. The pattern was starting to emerge. Anna had been lying, and she wasn't as innocent as I'd hoped. But there was still something off about all of this. Anna wasn't the kind of woman to casually cheat. Sure, the signs were there: the secrecy, the odd behavior, the hotel visits, but she had never been reckless. She had always been careful, methodical even. So why now? What had changed? Vince also mentioned something else that shook me to my core. He had uncovered a few old phone records showing Anna had been making late-night calls to a number that was registered under a name I didn't recognize: Luke Redding. That name hit me like a ton of bricks. Luke Redding. I had heard it once before, years ago. He was a childhood friend of Anna's, someone she had mentioned briefly during a casual conversation early in our relationship. I'd always dismissed him as someone from her past, someone who didn't matter anymore. But now, it seemed like he mattered a whole lot more than I had ever realized. I needed to confront her about this. I needed answers, and I needed them now. That evening, I didn't wait for her to bring up dinner plans or small talk. I sat down at the kitchen table while she was putting away groceries, my heart pounding. "Anna," I said, my voice steadied despite the fire burning in my chest, "we need to talk." Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think, Ryan. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, my tone hardening. "Complicated? Anna, you've been lying to me. I watched you walk into that motel with another man. I saw you, and I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when you're keeping secrets like this." She swallowed, her eyes glossy now, but I wasn't ready to feel sorry for her, not yet. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said, almost apologetically. "I never wanted you to be hurt. But Luke, he's not just some guy from my past. He's more." I waited for her to continue, the words hanging between us like a knife's edge. What was she saying? Who was Luke really? "Anna, what does that even mean?" I pressed. He's the reason I've been so distant. The reason I've been acting strange lately." Her voice cracked, and she met my gaze. "Ryan, I've been trying to tell you, but I didn't know how. Luke's been blackmailing me." My mind reeled. Blackmail? Anna had never seemed like someone who could be manipulated. She was strong, independent. This wasn't the woman I knew. "Blackmail?" I echoed. "What for?" She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her words were slow, measured. "It's not just him. It's a whole thing, Ryan. There's a group, people I've been involved with before we met. And now they're threatening me, threatening you." I blinked, trying to process the avalanche of information. A group? Threatening me? This was insane. My mind was racing. Anna, what the hell are you talking about? I asked, voice rising. What group? And why didn't you tell me any of this before? She hesitated. Because I was scared. I didn't know what you'd do. I didn't want you involved, Ryan. But I don't have a choice anymore. They're getting too close. And it's not just about us anymore. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, suffocating. What had I gotten myself into? What was Anna really hiding? And now, whatever was coming, it was coming for both of us. I felt the air in the room shift. Everything that had felt solid my life, my marriage, the trust I thought we had was crumbling in an instant. Anna's confession was like a door opening into a world I hadn't known existed, a dark world that threatened to swallow everything in its path. Who are these people? I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, every beat a reminder that this was real, this was happening. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she wrung them together, struggling to find the right words. I don't know their names. They're connected to things I got involved with before I met you, before we started our life together. There were debts, bad choices, things I thought I could escape, but I can't. They're here now, and they won't leave me alone. They've been watching me, waiting for me to slip up. I could see the fear in her eyes, something raw and unguarded. It wasn't the fear of getting caught in a lie. It was the fear of something much worse. This wasn't about an affair. This was about something far darker than I'd ever imagined. You've been blackmailed? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around what she was telling me. For what, Anna? What could they possibly want from you? Why didn't you tell me any of this? She shook her head, her face pale. I didn't know how. How could I? You wouldn't have understood. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. But now, I don't have a choice. Luke's involved because he was part of that world too. He was a mediator, a middleman. And when I tried to get out, they found a way to control me. I didn't want to bring you into this, Ryan. I was trying to protect you from all of it. But now I can't do it anymore. My mind was spinning. I'd spent weeks thinking the worst, convinced that Anna had betrayed me, and in some twisted way, I had been right. But not in the way I expected. She wasn't just having an affair. She was trapped in something much more dangerous, and I had no idea how to get her out of it. Who are these people, Anna? I demanded again, my voice hardening. What do they want? I don't know exactly, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. But I know they won't stop. They'll keep pushing, keep threatening, and if I don't do what they say, they'll hurt us. They know about you, Ryan. They know everything. A cold shiver ran through me. What do you mean they know about me? Anna's face twisted with guilt. They've been watching us both. They know our routines, where we live, where we go. Everything. They even know about your work, your meetings, the people you associate with. And if I don't do what they ask, if I don't stay involved, they'll ruin everything. They'll take you down too. I stood there, speechless. The implications of her words were too much to take in. My life, my work, everything I'd worked so hard for was being threatened by people I'd never even seen. And Anna had been caught in the middle of it all. Why the motel, Anna? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question had been nagging at me, and now it made a twisted sort of sense. Why were you there? Why all the secrecy? She glanced at me, her eyes filled with shame. They've been making me meet with people, men I don't know, to pass information. It was never about cheating on you, Ryan. I swear, I never wanted that. But they've been forcing me to do things I couldn't avoid. They set up these meetings, and I had no choice but to go along with it. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Everything felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. So, Luke Redding. He's been helping them? Anna nodded. He was supposed to be helping me get out of this. but he's just as deep into it as they are. He's been trying to keep me from getting caught, but it's getting worse. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending, Ryan. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room, trying to absorb everything. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a threat. And now, Anna was in danger. And so was I. We need to go to the police, I said suddenly. We need to get help. We can't handle this alone. Anna shook her head frantically. No, Ryan, you don't understand. These people don't just disappear when you call the police. They've got connections, power. If we go to the authorities, they'll retaliate. They'll hurt us. I stopped in my tracks, the weight of her words sinking in. I had no idea what kind of people we were dealing with, but I knew enough to realize that this wasn't a battle we could win on our own. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to make sense of everything. I didn't know how we got here, how my life had twisted into something so foreign. But I couldn't just let this continue. I couldn't let her let us be torn apart by these faceless shadows. Then what do we do? I asked quietly. How do we fight this? Anna's eyes filled with a new kind of determination. We fight smart, Ryan. We find a way to outsmart them. We have to go underground, find out who they really are, and take them down ourselves. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant, but one thing was clear: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whatever I had thought about betrayal, about love, I was about to learn a whole new set of lessons. The game had changed, and I was going to have to play by rules I never imagined. I stared at Anna, my mind reeling from the gravity of her words. Outsmart them? Take them down ourselves. It felt absurd, like something out of a movie, but the look in her eyes, determined, almost desperate, told me that she wasn't playing around. She had been living in fear for so long, and now she was asking me to step into the shadows with her. What exactly do you have in mind? I asked, my voice cautious. I needed to know what she was thinking, because everything about this felt like it could spiral out of control. Anna took a deep breath, her fingers tapping nervously against the counter. I've been doing my best to gather information on them. The people behind all of this. I've managed to track some of their movements, but I don't have all the pieces yet. We need to figure out who's really pulling the strings. And Luke, he's not going to be much help, not anymore. He's as much a pawn in this as I am. I ran a hand through my hair, my thoughts racing. I'd never imagined anything like this. But as much as I hated the idea of being dragged into this mess, a part of me knew Anna wasn't lying. She wasn't the type to fabricate something like this, and whatever had been happening to her, it was much bigger than I'd realized. You've been keeping track of them? I asked, raising an eyebrow. What exactly do you mean by that? She nodded. I've been making note of who's been visiting the places they frequent, and I've been gathering any little clue I can. I've got a few addresses, phone numbers not much, but it's a start. If we can get more information, we might be able to identify who's in charge and what they really want from me. We can't just sit around and wait for them to make the next move. We need to take control. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about Anna anymore. It was about both of us. We were in this together now, whether I was ready for it or not. I'm not sure I can do this, Anna, I said, my voice low. I'm not a detective. I'm not a fighter. I've never had to deal with anything like this before. Anna reached out and placed a hand on my arm, her grip firm. I know this isn't what you signed up for, Ryan. I didn't want to drag you into this. But you're the only one who can help me get through this. If we don't fight back now, they'll keep tightening the noose. I'm asking you to trust me. I looked down at her hand on my arm, the steady warmth of it offering a strange sense of comfort despite the chaos surrounding us. Trust. That was the key, wasn't it? It had always been the foundation of our relationship. And yet now, in this moment, it felt more fragile than ever. I don't know what's going to happen next, Anna, I said slowly. But I can't just walk away from this. Not now. Not when you need me the most. Her eyes softened, a mixture of relief and gratitude flashing across her face. I won't let you down, Ryan. I promise. I didn't know what would happen next. What I did know was that we couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I was in this with her, whether I liked it or not. And together, we were going to fight back. The next few days were a blur of planning, tracking, and gathering any piece of information we could. Anna started to show me the notebooks she'd been keeping, scraps of notes, names, numbers, times, and dates of meetings she'd had with people who were involved in this mess. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see the pattern. There were certain names that kept popping up, certain locations, people who seemed to be connected to some kind of underground operation. We started to map it out, piece by piece. I didn't know exactly how we were going to confront these people, or even who they really were. But there was one thing I knew for certain. We couldn't just sit back and let them control our lives. On the fourth night after Anna's confession, something shifted. We had spent hours in front of the computer, going over the names and phone numbers Anna had uncovered. I was trying to connect the dots, trying to make sense of the mess, when Anna's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. "It's him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a rush of panic, my heart pounding. "Luke?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "He wants to meet." "Why now?" I asked, my voice tight with suspicion. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "But I think he's in trouble. He wouldn't reach out unless he was." We both sat there for a moment, the tension thick in the air. This was the chance we'd been waiting for, the opportunity to finally get answers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a trap. Luke had been playing both sides, and now he wanted to meet. It felt like the calm before the storm. "We need to be careful," I said, my mind racing with possibilities. "What if this is a setup?" "I don't know," Anna replied, her voice shaking. "But I have to go. I need to hear what he has to say." I looked at her, torn. This was it. We were walking straight into the lion's den, and I had no idea what we were going to find when we got there. "I'll go with you," I said, my decision made. "I'm not letting you face this alone." Anna looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "I'm scared, Ryan. What if this doesn't end the way we hope?" I didn't have an answer for that. All I could offer her was my presence, my support. "We'll figure it out together," I said, trying to sound confident even though my own nerves were on edge. She nodded, her face set in determination. Together. We didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: we were no longer just fighting for our lives. We were fighting for each other, and that made all the difference. With a deep breath, we gathered what little we could, small hidden microphones, a couple of cameras, and prepared for the meeting. The storm was coming, and there was no turning back now. We arrived at the meeting point just before dusk, the quiet streets of the city feeling eerily empty. I could feel the weight of the air between us, thick with uncertainty and tension. Anna was silent, her face pale as she stared out the window, lost in her thoughts. "I don't like this, Ryan," she said quietly. "I don't know what's going to happen tonight." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel tighter, my own nerves rising. "Neither do I. But we're here now. We have to see this through." She didn't respond, and we sat in silence, the sound of the engine the only thing breaking the stillness. My mind raced through all the possibilities, all the ways this could go wrong. Luke might be our way in, the only person who could give us answers. But at the same time, he had always been a wild card, a man caught between loyalties and fear. What if he'd only been playing both sides, feeding us false hope? Anna's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and hesitated before answering, her voice barely audible. "Luke, it's time, isn't it?" I couldn't hear his reply, but Anna's face dropped. Whatever he said, It wasn't good. She hung up and turned to me. "It's over," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Luke's not coming. He betrayed us, Ryan." I felt the air in the car go thick. Betrayal. That word hit harder than any of the lies she'd told me before. I'd known we were in a dangerous game, but this felt like the final blow. Luke was out of the picture now, and we were left with nothing but the mess he had created. "I knew it," I said quietly, clenching my jaw. "I knew we couldn't trust him." Anna wiped her eyes, trying to regain her composure. "I didn't want to believe it, but he's part of this too. And now we're left alone to deal with it." We sat in the car for a while, not knowing what to do next. Anna's phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't even look at the screen before turning it off. "We need to go home," I said. "This isn't our fight anymore." Anna didn't respond. She just nodded, her hands shaking as she gripped the door handle. When we got back to the apartment, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I walked in first, dropping my keys onto the table. The place we'd once shared, full of memories, felt hollow now, empty. The trust that had once bound us seemed like a distant echo, something that couldn't be reclaimed. I turned to Anna. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice strained. This isn't the life I wanted. It's not the life you promised me. And I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." Anna's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She knew, deep down, that I was right. The truth had been exposed, and there was no way to undo the damage. "I never meant for any of this to happen, Ryan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you. She paused, as though the words were too much to say. "I was so afraid." I nodded, understanding the fear. I'd seen it in her eyes from the very beginning. But it didn't matter now. The trust we'd built was gone, and the lies we'd told each other had grown too big to ignore. We had both lost ourselves in this mess. "Anna," I began, trying to steady my voice, but it cracked anyway. I think it's time we let go." Her face paled, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, looking back at me. There were no words left between us, no promises to make, no future to look forward to. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to lose you." I didn't know what to say in response. I had spent so many nights convincing myself that we could fix this, that somehow we could rebuild. But standing there now, in the wreckage of everything we once had, I knew the truth. Some things can't be fixed. "Goodbye, Anna," I said quietly, my heart heavy with the weight of it all. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Ryan." And just like that, the chapter of our lives that had once been filled with love, hope, and dreams came to an end. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final plea to save what was left. Just the painful acknowledgement that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the damage is too deep to repair. I walked out of the apartment that night, feeling like a shell of the person I'd been a year ago. The pain of betrayal still clung to my skin, but I also felt a strange sense of relief, as if the weight of everything that had been buried for so long had finally been lifted. It wasn't the end I had wanted, but it was the end that I needed. And as I stepped out into the cold night, I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I was free. Free from the lies, the fear, and the darkness that had defined my life for so long. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for me to rebuild, not with Anna, but with the person I had lost along the way, myself. We value your opinion in comment section. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.